We're live.
Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Forza. I'm here with my good friend Noah Green and Jordan Worth, and this is Everyman BJJ. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the coronavirus and the flu and skin infections and all that stuff that that's out there, and how worried is the Jiu Jitsu community about that, or the wrestling community, or combat sports community? How do we deal with those sorts of things? You've got blood, you've got sweat, you've got everything else on those mats. How do we navigate that? We're going to talk a little bit about Andrew Yang, if we can get around to it, who apparently is running for president. A lot of you probably don't know that he's running for president, but he has this great idea that every police officer, if he's president, somehow, some way, he has an idea that every police officer should be at minimum a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We can get around to that. We're going to weigh into that. But first, let's talk about a word that someone like me, who's been around Jiu-Jitsu, who's been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since 2001, this word was a word that I heard very early on in the first year of my training. And it was a word that's very captivating. It has a way of capturing the imagination. It is a word that is derogatory. It is a word that was thrown around as an insult. And it was something that was sort of drilled into you, indoctrinated into you when you started training jiu-jitsu, because back in 2001, 2002, there weren't as many options. You didn't have a jiu-jitsu academy on every corner like you're starting to see now. You didn't have that many options. And so the instructors had a lot more control and a lot more say over who could train, who didn't. And they could really set the terms. The instructors had a lot of leverage to set and dictate the terms of, hey, you will be training here and here's the rules. And of course, as the sport has grown and become more popular, and the customer has many more options, particularly say in Las Vegas, where you've got, I don't know, we need to count the number of schools, but you look at martial arts schools in Las Vegas, you're talking probably a couple hundred if you include traditional martial arts. If you include jiu-jitsu, you might be talking 50, 60, 70, 80. I mean, you've got dozens and dozens of reputable, high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructors and martial arts instructors in Vegas. We're very lucky. Southern California has a lot of that. Florida has a lot of that. Brazil has a lot of that. But in any event, the word that I was first introduced to right around 2002, and you speak some pretty good Portuguese, Noah. You're going to recognize it. I'm going to mispronounce it, and so I'm going to let you correct me. But when we heard it, to my American ears, it sounded like the word Creonte. And the word, I guess the Portuguese say Creonte. Is that correct? What's the correct pronunciation of it? No, we used to say Creonte, but is it Creonte?
Creonte with the with the T, it kind of becomes a ch with the Carioca accent.
Yeah, and Jordan, you're familiar with, you've heard that word as well, right? Even though you're
of course,
a young guy.
Of course.
Yeah, you've heard that word. And so that word, for the people out there listening, let's start there, guys. Jordan, maybe you can tell us, what was your introduction to that word, and what was, what are your thoughts on sort of, I guess, where should the lines be drawn when it comes to loyalty to an academy or an instructor? Because that's really the deeper thing we're talking about here when we talk about that word. When did you first encounter it, and what are your thoughts generally on where should the lines be drawn on that loyalty to academy and instructor?
Yeah, those are some good questions. And so when I first started training, I was training at a place called Sunset Boxing MMA, and it was pretty much like a completely no politic gym. It was almost like a LA boxing style gym, where it was like really cheap entry. There wasn't really a lot of like super strong loyalty to that gym. So that word wasn't really thrown around too much. You know what I mean? I didn't really hear that word until I was training jiu-jitsu for about like 3 years or so. Like, I didn't even hear the word Creonte, and then I started really like delving, probably about like 2 years, honestly. Probably about like 2 years, and I probably heard that word. Mm-hmm. That was when I really started like looking at the culture myself. But and I only heard the word online, you know what I mean? Because my personal experience with jiu-jitsu, fortunately, has not been full of politics, whereas usually in jiu-jitsu there's a lot of politics, whether it be no matter what school or lineage you're coming from, there's a lot of politics. And whether now that I'm at 10th Planet, there's still not very many politics, but now there is here and there. There's a little bit of politics, even though 10th Planet especially is like probably the least. You'll see the least amount of drama and the least amount of politics from 10th Planet. Like that's the one thing that I like about 10th Planet, and the reason why I gravitated toward that system and toward 10th Planet is because Eddie trains whatever works. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of systems are like, oh, like we have this certain style, and especially before the age of the internet, people had like their certain style, and that school trained this certain way. And if you didn't like that school training, or you were doing techniques of like a different school, some people would look at you a certain way. And I like that 10th Planet didn't have that mentality, and we like to train everything that works. And there's kind of like a no politics mentality, like a no drama, no politics mentality. Whereas jiu-jitsu kind of gets kind of full of that at times. What do you think about that, Frank? What do you think about all the politics in jiu-jitsu?
Well, first let's turn it to Noah. Noah, you're a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You've trained, you've done privates with me. You've trained, you have your blue belt under Renzo Gracie there out in Manhattan. And you've been to Brazil a number of times. You're married to a native Brazilian. What do you make of that word, Creonte? What does it mean to you? And how do you navigate sort of the, now you're there with Renzo, you're in a really good spot. But how do you navigate that, the loyalty and the rules and what Jordan calls, at least, that, maybe if there are politics involved, how do you navigate that?
I would say that first, I grew up in Texas, and I'm going to answer this in another way, and it's how Southerners feel about the South. These ideals and these feelings about the South. As a Texan, I would tell you I'm first a Texan before I'm an American, because it's kind of an honor. It's kind of you laugh, but
I like that.
Texans know where they're from. There's a kind of honorific. It's kind of an honorific code that you live by, and it's a sense of pride. But there's a lot. There has to be a bit of unpacking here with, because there's an omnidirectional relationship between the jiu-jitsu student, and because you first have to look at roles and in the relationships. There's a role between the student and the instructor, and there are multiple instructors at Renzo's. There's also a relationship between you and the other students that you train with. And then there's also your relationship with the academy itself. And then your relationship with those outside of the academy who don't train there. And so there's a bit of, you have to break this down and look at it from that perspective. I bring up the Texas roots or the Southerners approach because it's a sense of identity. Early on, blue belt, I think it's still kind of early. I've been training there with Renzo's for so long. But I've also trained in Houston at McCall MMA in a small town, a suburb outside of Houston called Humble. Humble, for those who don't know, who don't know that it's called Humble. But McCall MMA, and he's now with BTT, Brazilian Top Team, I believe. He's with them now. I think probably not until you're several years in that you recognize that there are tribal lines, and the sense of tribalism. And I bring up the honor code of the South, which comes actually.
And by the way, let me interject for 1 second.
Sure.
Just for the sake of the viewer, when you say tribalism, a lot of the viewers will probably automatically associate a negative connotation with that, and that's not what you mean. You don't mean that to ascribe. You're using it neither negative nor positive. You're using that as a neutral term, just to mean that that's just sort of the way people just sort of fall in line, and and it's their team, it's their identity, and they just sort of gravitate to a certain tribe. I don't want people to think that that's like a negative thing. You're saying, yeah, that there's a when you started training jiu-jitsu, you saw sort of this tribalism. You're not. I want to make clear, you're not ascribing a negative connotation to that. I mean,
no, there's not a negative at all. And I mean, actually, there's a great book that goes into this, and it's called Tribe, and it's by Sebastian Junger or Younger, and he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast before, as an example here. What I'm talking about.
Yeah, he's done some good books.
And so I'm referring. So the sense of tribe that I'm referring to is more of how he defines it in that discussion. But let me go back and say something about some things I've heard, explanations of where the southern mentality of tribes comes from, and that's from the Scottish Highlands. In the Appalachian area of the U.S., a lot of Scots migrated there when they first came here, and so they developed this culture, this clansmanship. And I'm not talking about the KKK. I'm talking about clan with a C and instead of a K. This clan mentality, and this tribalism, and it happens in small groups. You build a unit identity.
Yeah.
The Marine Corps, we have our own tribe. So there's these various intersections of tribal identity.
And there's a lot of necessity. I'm sorry to interject. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of necessity. Whether you're an immigrant here, you're new here, you need a job. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you're picked on, right? And especially when people were coming over then, the Scots, and we see that with other groups. You're picked on, so you're vulnerable. So it can help you hit the ground running. Maybe get a job. Maybe if you have a certain religious and values. I mean, especially in the old days where it was the Wild West. So it makes sense to. They do that in prison, right? I mean, you go to prison and you've only got a couple of options in general. You either walk alone, which is the hardest and the most dangerous. You walk alone, you're not affiliated, or you pick, they've got groups in there. They've got the Muslims, they've got the 5%ers, they've got the Hispanic gangs, they've got, the African-American gangs, you've got the white supremacist gangs. You only have a few options. And usually you got to pick one or you walk alone. And if you walk alone, you got to be a tough cookie because it's hard to navigate that. But anyway, that you can continue on to it. That's what you mean is like the necessity a lot of times, going back even to the Scottish coming over here, the necessity of people sort of aligning with a crew or a tribe or a certain group for these various reasons.
Yeah, well, I think that it goes deeper into our hidden, what makes us human is for us to belong to a tribe. Now, there are some who are, I think they call them omegas. And these are, there's alpha and there's a beta, but there are other Greek words, there's a sigma and there's an omega, and it refers to, I think scientists use those terms when they're like studying wolf packs. And because a pack is like a tribe, it has its own values, and the members do certain things for the benefit of the greater unit of the tribe, of its tribe or its pack. And a lot of what jiu-jitsu, we develop these, and that's part of what makes us human. And definitely in Sebastian's book of Tribe, if you haven't read that book, it's phenomenal. I listened to it on audio, on Audible. And
I'll have to do, yeah.
Yeah, and the podcast itself has an Audible affiliate with as well. I might as well bring that up. Everyman BJJ has an Audible affiliate with. But anyways, that's a great sense of where we get this tribalism from. And so with the flavor of jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu academies, you develop these certain quirks of how tribes kind of out in the wild, how they come about and the certain behaviors. And I've visited, when in Vegas, I go to Robert Drysdale's academy. I've been wanting to go to 10th Planet there in Henderson under Coach Casey. I've stopped by a few times to say hello, and very nice people. Being a traveling Jiu Jitsu person, you get to go to different places. I went to, I think, Gordo's in Bahia, and that's that's really close to Pedro de Gavea in Rio.
You look nice.
He's doing a podcast too.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, so I don't mean to.
Blown now.
Your cover is blown, huh? So I just go mentioning these things about the tribalism. That's part of our human character, is to belong to something, because that's what defines us. I have a patch that's a Renzo Gracie Academy patch. That's a label. And I've found, we can share our relative experiences about being a part of these different tribes, which tribe you're in, and the things that come about, that just, that it's like a petri dish, what comes about. Like I've seen at, what's his name? Evan Dunham's academy. I've gone there, and he's had a little plastic tray that you put your feet in to clean your feet before you get on the mat. And
great idea.
It's a great idea, and it's quite salient to the topic you're bringing up about the coronavirus. The coronavirus is, and I know at Enzo's there was a virus that was affecting guys' eyes. So the academy changed its rules about shoes, and now everyone leaves their shoes upstairs. So what I'd like to see eventually is if, like, Fuji, which is the ones who produce the mats, if they can produce an antimicrobial mat, that would be huge.
That's interesting.
Yeah, an antimicrobial mat.
I wonder if they could do that.
Yeah, I wonder if they could. That would be something that would be a big, like 3M, which is Minnesota Mining and Materials. I think that's what it stands for, 3M. If they could produce some kind of surface that has antimicrobial
we have.
qualities.
By the way, that we have not exhausted the Creonte.
Oh, sorry. Whoops.
So don't just shift. We have not peeled back the layers of Creonte and loyalty and I would say what we're talking about here, going back to what you call tribalism and tribal, what you're saying, what you're describing as sort of this urge to belong to a group, belong to a tribe, going back centuries, going back probably to ancient history. Modern day corporations would call it culture. I mean, that's pretty much what they would call your culture. And that's your values, your norms, your rules, your guidelines. And every gym, every academy has to have them, right? You can't just have anarchy on the mats, as much as people may think, well, there's no rules and that makes my instructor so lovable. He's so nice. She's so nice. And there's no rules. It just doesn't work that way, right? It has to have, there has to be some culture. There has to be some rules, some principles, some norms. We all agree with that, right?
Well, you brought in something.
So I think what's interesting is that concept of Creonte can also depend on whether or not you're the instructor or you're the owner, not just the instructor, but the owner of multiple. Let's say you're the instructor and you have a vast affiliation of 20 schools, 30 schools, 50 schools, some of them 100 schools, some of them more than 100 affiliates, right? When you start having that many affiliates, you start having 50, 100, you're making some serious money. All those affiliates are paying for private. You're getting a bunch of private lessons from that. You're getting, seminars every year. You're getting usually 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, sometimes more per month from each affiliate. So you're raking a lot of money by scaling even if you're not teaching, you don't even have to teach every day. If you can just get the affiliates, if you can multiply, if you can get a bunch of black belts and give out your black belts and multiply and get 50 black belts who want to teach and open their own academy, or 100, and then they're under your brand, under your umbrella, and then they're paying you for seminars each year. They're paying you monthly to use your name, your brand, which is usually, if you're a big name instructor, it's more recognizable. And so you've got the one perspective, which could be, hey, the loyalty of that instructor, expecting, hey, you're going to ride my name. I'm the instructor. I'm the one with most of the knowledge here. I can shorten your learning curve. And so part of it is understanding their perspective, because they do count, right? If you're looking at it from their perspective, you can understand why loyalty is a huge deal and why it's a big deal and why they've got all this knowledge. I mean, you take somebody who's a really good instructor, you could take someone who's really talented and natural like Jordan, and maybe it took me 15 years to learn it. You've got Jordan with his work ethic, with his natural ability. You could shorten his learning curve substantially. What took me 15 years, or Casey 15 years, we could teach it to Jordan in 4 or 5, right? It's not, and of course there's the internet and things like that can also accelerate the learning curve. But a really good instructor does bring value. Even though you're paying them, they can shorten your learning curve. They can invest in you and help you get a big name. So it's not like they're just like, oh, they're just a dictator and all these things that, I'm not saying that. I don't think you guys are saying it. We have to understand their perspective too, where they are investing. Sometimes they're letting some of their best students train for free, right? Sometimes they're paying for them to go to tournaments. Sometimes they're getting them sponsors. So there are a lot of instructors that have affiliates that are doing a lot for their students, that are going above and beyond, that are investing in them, that are substantially shortening their learning curve. So you can understand the expectation of some a high degree of loyalty there. Now, how do we reconcile that with the student, though? Because now, peeling back the onion, going from the student perspective, the student saying, well, wait a minute, and this is what we're seeing, guys. This is where the lines start to get blurred. This is what we're talking about here. The student's thinking, hey, well, I'm paying you. So for you to have all these rules and tell me I can't train somewhere else, I'm paying you 125 or 150, or sometimes in like New York, 250, or some markets they're paying 300 a month. In some really high, high-end markets, 300 a month. That client is paying, and they're saying, wait, I don't want you to have all these rules. If I want to go down the street and train with whoever and do a private with your competitor, a private lesson, I should be able to do that. I'm paying you. I'm the customer. I'm always right, which is sort of, built into us here in America. And so I want you guys to weigh in on that. That's sort of like, where is the middle ground there? Where is the harmony, the balance of those two? Because they both have a point up to a point.
So exactly. So I actually realized that I got pretty sidetracked on my last time that I started talking about the politics and whatnot.
Yeah.
So what I was meaning to get around to was exactly kind of what you're talking about right now, Frank. So yes, there is two sides, right? And there is, loyalty is a massive thing in jiu-jitsu, and I completely agree. Your instructor is going to build you up. He's going to teach you everything that he knows. He's going to invest in you. He's going to do all this stuff for you, right? So you owe your instructor a lot. You do owe your loyalty to the instructor. But the instructor should also be confident and just confident inside themselves in their own instruction, that they have that student's loyalty, and that if that student decides to go cross-train at a different gym, that they're just doing it to become better, you know what I mean? Just to get a different look. They're not doing it to go leave and train at that other school. That's the issue with the politics that I was meaning to get around to. Is a lot of people, like, say you train, I'll just, what's like a school I don't deal with too much. We'll just use Gracie Baja for general, just because I don't know if Gracie Baja does or doesn't. We'll just use Gracie Baja for general because they're a big school. Say Gracie Baja, this Gracie Baja you train at does not allow you to cross-train, right? That doesn't really make any sense to me. You should be able to train at Gracie Baja, and your loyalty and your allegiance should be to Gracie Baja, but that instructor should be so confident in his instruction that even if you go cross-train somewhere else and train with a different instructor, you're going to have no intentions of leaving your school because you have loyalty and allegiance to Gracie Baja, and that is your coach. You're not going to get another head coach. You're just going to get maybe different training partners, maybe a different look of instruction, whatever it is. Cross training helps. It does. Period. It helps. People who cross train are a lot better who people are just training with their strict coaches and their strict training partners. When you're training with different people, you're getting better. It just works that way. So I feel like you should be able to go out and cross train at different gyms, but your loyalty should always be to your one specific gym. And that's also what I was talking about with 10th Planet. And 10th Planet's thing is like, they don't care if you cross train, right? You can go train. Coach Casey always says he doesn't care if you go train with somebody else, right? Coach Casey says he doesn't care if I go take a train. He doesn't care if I go take a class at Drysdale's. He doesn't care if I go take this boxing class somewhere else or like a wrestling class over here. He wants me to go out and cross train because he's so confident in his coaching and his program that he knows that I'm not going to leave him and that I'm his student. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm trying to say, Frank?
Yes, so, but where does Coach Casey draw? Where does Coach Casey draw the line? And I've never met him. Him and I are Facebook friends. I've heard great things about him. Some people, Joe Benavides, who I used to train with, trains over there. Lance Palmer's over there. So he's obviously he sounds like a really good guy. But where does Coach Casey draw the line on that loyalty? On okay, you cross the line there. Where's the line drawn?
So it's kind of just like, who are you spending your time with, right? If you're spending your time all the time with Coach Casey and he knows that you're his guy, then it's not really in question. You know what I mean? Coach Casey knows whose guys are and whose guys aren't. You know what I mean? And he invests into the guys who spend a lot of time with him and the guys who are just using him, because there are a lot of guys who are just trying to use Coach Casey because he is so free spirited. There is a lot of guys who are trying to use him. And he doesn't really invest as much into those guys. You know what I mean? He's still nice to them. He'll still allow them to train. He'll still say hi to them and whatnot. But he doesn't pretty much like, if you're pretty much the guys who are around Coach Casey all the time, those are Coach Casey's guys. If you're somebody's head coach, you're going to be around that coach a lot. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whoever you're around the most, that's who your coach is going to be. So as long as the guys are putting in work with Coach Casey, sweating with Coach Casey, listening to him, putting in a bunch of hours with him on the mats during the week, and Coach Casey knows he's there with him the most, then there isn't really much of an issue. And I also haven't really asked Coach Casey that exact question, so I understand. I understand for him right now. But I'm
asking what we can't speak for Coach Casey, but what your sense of the parameters in. You cannot speak for him, and we. None of us knows exactly what, and those may be different. For a lot of instructors, it may be different. It may depend on the student, where he knows he has so much trust and so much faith in certain students like you're an instructor there, and it may not be questioned, whereas maybe there's someone else that, it's interesting because the sport has evolved. This has been one, that as the sport evolves, it's not just, hey, there's more kids training. Hey, there's a lot more women training, right? Hey, the world is catching up to the secret of how great Jiu Jitsu is for anti-bullying and for confidence building and for the relationships and the camaraderie. It's not just that. Part of the evolution is the evolution of this Creonte thing. The evolution of where these kind of lines are drawn is fascinating, because in the old days, when you had less choices and it was very traditional, you could not cross this line. Or we wouldn't even be having this discussion, 15 years ago. If you had this discussion and you went into school, you get yourself in a lot of trouble. You could just make problems. It was just taboo. It was just assumed. It was like the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Don't talk about that. Don't be a Creonte. Don't let. And there were tons of guys who were training somewhere else, or they would go to someone's house and train in a garage, and they would tell the guy, hey, please don't say anything. Don't mention. Don't let. They would never,
that's the
even
politics I'm talking about.
15 years ago, if two people trained from different academies, they would never take a picture after the training session and then put it on social media and be like, hey, just finished, 5 hard rounds with Jordan Worth of 10th Planet or whatever. I'm not saying the 10th Planet wouldn't allow that, but I'm saying the schools that existed back then with a very traditional atmosphere, you just wouldn't see that. It was very hush hush. If you did train with somebody from another gym, you kept it on the down low. You didn't talk about it. It was like Vegas. What happens in Vegas? Like you train with them. Do not talk about it. There were so many people. So it's interesting to see the evolution of the sport to today, where I think the norm is really becoming closer to what Jordan is describing, which is the average typical American. This is my sense. We haven't done any scientific data on it, but my sense, and I think Jordan agrees, you may agree too with it, Noah, that my sense is that the average typical jiu-jitsu customer out there wants that freedom of, hey, if I want to do privates with the person down the street, if I want to train with them on occasion, I can do it. If I want to be here for 2 or 3 months, and then that is my prerogative. I'm the paying customer. And so the typical customer nowadays is like, wants that freedom, wants that mobility. But having said that, I want to say, so this sport has evolved, and that is a significant shift in the sport. However, in defense of the very traditional, and I know some in Las Vegas, there's a guy that stands out. I'm not going to say his name. I love him. He is a very traditional, acclaimed old school black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he runs a tight ship. It's loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. If you want to go and do whatever, you go do it somewhere else. And I know a couple of them like that, and I love them, and they're fantastic guys. And I would say, just me personally, as I'm like, hey, the ecosystem, different strokes for different folks, the ecosystem needs those traditional loyalist hardliners too. There's a place for them. It's their baby, it's their gym, it's their academy, and they can make the rules they want to make, and they're totally entitled to do that. And for the people that they have, their students love them. Their students are fiercely loyal, and their students are okay with it, right? The students are willingly saying, hey, I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm good to go here. Especially the people that aren't competing a lot of times. They don't need, the people that are competing more are probably more likely to jump around because they always want to be on the cutting edge, the front edge. And you have a lot of students, the other 98% who aren't going to be hardcore competitors at most gyms. And that 98%, a lot of them, they're fine with sort of that loyalty, that, hey, this is the way it is. You don't go train. You don't do privates with these. And a lot of people are fine with that because they are getting really good instruction. And they're thinking, hey, I don't want to be a world champ. I don't want to fight in a UFC octagon. So the ecosystem does need those. And there's some phenomenal instructors that are just like, hey, Frank, I'm old school. Loyalty is a big deal to me. And the older I get, the more I understand that mindset, guys. The more I do, I can understand both sides, but the more I can understand the guy saying, you know what, Frank, I don't want the headaches of somebody jumping around. I was just trained. I was indoctrinated that that's wrong. It's not loyal. I don't want, I know one guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but everybody knows him. It's like he's worked with world champions and then they left him. And it broke his heart. It wasn't just that he's just trying to be like, hey, he's like, Frank, I'm not trying to be a dictator. It's just, I love that guy. I invested in him. And then for him to go and change teams broke my heart. And they get their heart broken a couple times by an athlete. And they're thinking it's not just money for all of them. Some of them, it just really is the code of loyalty. It's the relationship. It's the, hey, you're family. And,
yes.
and
family,
then when
tribe member.
And then when somebody leaves, it's not just a jiu-jitsu thing. It's a life thing. It's you're my family thing. And then when that kid, that student that they love, they've invested so much, leaves them, and it breaks their heart. And some of them just throw their hands in the air like, look, I don't want to get close to an elite. I know some of them that don't want to work with elite athletes, especially because they're the highest risk of jumping like that.
Yes.
And they're like, look, I'm okay, Frank. I'd rather work with the regular people. I'd rather have them and not the world champions because it goes to the world champions' heads. They jump ship. They break your heart in the end. They minimize how much you've done for them. And I understand those instructors, and they have a point sometimes too. No, we haven't let you talk in the last 15 minutes. So, give us your take on that because your take. You're fairly new. You've seen both sides of it. What's your take on it?
I'm also going to run and get a charger, guys. My phone's on 25%.
Okay.
I don't know how that happened. It was on 100%.
All right. Yeah. Noah.
I would first, I would think we need to throw a line out to those professors, those instructors who have gone through that experience and just take note, look at their perspective and say, do they have the tools of healing themselves in a way, because there's a little bit of psychological pain that they go through. How do they heal themselves through that? And some of them just, I won't be vulnerable again. They choose to not be vulnerable ever again. I would tell you that I would say that I would hope that they would reconsider and make themselves vulnerable again, because that's courage. That's courage off the mat. A lot of what we see, that the disgruntlement and unhappiness is what happens off the mat rather than what happens on the mat. It happens in other sports and other areas. I wanted to make an observation that I've seen very little of Hinzo. That's partially due to me. I haven't been training as much lately. I've been working a lot of hours. But since he became ambassador of tourism for Brazil, I haven't seen much of him at all. And I would never use the word Creonte with Hinzo, but he has so many affiliates and he has so many other collateral duties.
And he's in Abu Dhabi. He's in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates all the time. He's huge over there. I mean, he's the man. He's a one of a kind. You're very lucky. He is just the one of a kind. I mean, when was it 60 Minutes did feature the guy? I mean, 60 Minutes featured the guy. Come on, end of story. I mean,
So yeah, we talk about going to other gyms. I rarely see Hinzo. I rarely see Hinzo. In years past, the only times I remember, like, I can always count on if Hinzo's in town. If we have a blizzard, Hinzo will teach that night. There's something about, if we have a blizzard, Hinzo shows up. There's a high correlation between the two. So I expect to see Hinzo at the academy soon teaching. But he never. I think I remember just one time he taught.
Nobody's gonna cry for you with Donna Hare and Sapo and all the other. My boy Luca Atala and all the others. He got an army of great black belts. Nobody's crying.
Well, hold on. So let me say a few other things, okay? Daniel Paulino has taken, since he got his black belt, he started teaching a lot, and that shifted. So he's covering more of when I would see Neiman, but I haven't seen Igor. I have been seeing Igor a lot, much more than before, and a lot of attention now with the Upper West Side Academy of Hinzo's. That Luca Tella has. I want to say Luca Nutella for some reason.
That's what I would say. That'd be me.
Luca Nutella. Hey, speaking of Nutella, I think I have
got a nice Italian name, a paisano.
Since the Upper West Side Academy opened up, I've even seen I've seen less of Hobson, Filio. So the Jiu Jitsu professors, and now, by the way, Danaher teaches midday, and those of us who have a job during the day, it's hard for us to get out and go to train with Danaher. He speaks so softly that I have trouble hearing when I go to his class, and there's so many people there.
Would he call you Mr. Green? Yes, do this, Mr. Green. Mr. Green, put your hand on the mat, Mr. Green. Don't put your hand on the mat, Mr. Green.
Yeah, he doesn't know my name.
Okay.
Yeah, Danaher does not know my name.
Now, I want to say this. This is an interesting point, though, because I know I'm not going to say names here again, but I know a number of friends that are black belts, and of course they travel a lot, right? They may travel from all around America. They travel to other countries, and whenever they go, of course, you know Noah, that the one thing that is, well, there's many things that are so awesome about this community is I could go to Portugal tomorrow. I could take a flight there for business, and I take my gi, and without knowing anybody in Portugal, just through our network, I could probably find a room. There's some black belt in Portugal that would say, listen, stay with us, house is yours, you can train with us. And that is the jiu-jitsu community, where it's like they're not going to hire a private security firm, a private eye to investigate you. You're a black belt from a legitimate source. You've competed. We heard good things about you. You're more than welcome to stay with us, at the very least on the couch, or we have a room, right? That is very typical in this community. But I have friends, so a lot of people take their gi, right? A lot of the professionals, my friend David Gill here in Las Vegas, there's a lot of professionals. There's black belts that are managers, fight managers of fighters in UFC, and they'll travel and they take that gi with them everywhere. They're always getting trained wherever, and they're greeted. It's usually very hospitable. It's almost a code where you're kind to that black belt, even you don't know them. You don't even need to know them, right? But I do know black belts and students, quite a few, that if they travel somewhere in another state or in another country, they will reach out to their instructor, who they got their black belt from or their belt from, and they will say, where should I train? As a courtesy. That is much more common than you think in terms of that loyalty. Are you okay with me training here? It's not our affiliate, or where should I train? I know that is fairly common.
I've heard of that.
With certain schools. What's also interesting about the boundaries is some instructors are okay if you go to another state or another country and you just train wherever you want. But if you're in their zip code and you go to the rival around the corner, even though they may be friendly, usually there's a lot of friendliness, particularly where you are in New York. I mean, I'm sure, like, say, Renzo and Marcelo, I'm sure that Renzo and Marcelo probably get along fine. I don't imagine that there's like tension and Renzo's spreading. I mean, I think those guys are both very respectful when they get along. I think Donaher gets along with Marcelo. You've got some great options there. But what is interesting to see is some instructors may be okay if you go to Brazil, Noah, and you train with somebody that's not of the Renzo Gracie tree, might be totally fine with that. But when people start doing it in the same zip code, that's when it kind of hits too close.
All right. So
it is interesting where the lines tend to get drawn right now.
It's very interesting, and sorry to interrupt you, Frank, but it's just sure. I think that what you touch upon within 1 minute of my New York apartment, I had Vitor Shaolin. Mm-hmm. I've never stepped foot. Sorry?
A legend, phenomenal.
I've never stepped foot into that building. Within, I don't know how many minutes it is away. I don't know where Marcelo Garcia's academy is. I just know it's probably under a 5-minute walk from Renzo's, or 10-minute. I don't know. Because the thought never crossed my mind to go there. We're talking about tribal loyalties. We're talking about social custom, social norm, as far as where that is. And the only time really I recall this topic ever coming up, I was in white belt class, and Rafael Costa mentioned he said something to the effect of, well, if you ever go to another crosstown academy, just don't say it in front of me. And don't say it on my mat. You could tell that that was not said in a joke. So that was a bit of imbuing a social norm onto us white belts, where the teacher-student relationship was in place. So you had that. Now look at how does that work in judoka? How does that work? How does that work in karate? They have their own tribes.
What the jumping around that you see in jiu-jitsu, you don't see that. Like in wrestling, you don't see that very much. in MMA, I think, MMA really might have been the first mover. You don't see that even a lot in boxing. Yeah, Floyd Mayweather will pay certain fighters. It's different because high level boxing, they're paying the sparring partner. So yeah, you could bring in somebody particularly, but then they're signing, they're giving you the work you need. You can tell them, take it easy on them. I mean, they're literally world champions. They bring them in, they'll say, look, don't beat up so and so. Like, you're here to give him work, but not hurt him. And
Okay.
and so, but so MMA is really the place, I think, where you just saw, and MMA traditionally, I mean, I don't think anybody in any professional sport fires their trainers more than, MMA people, that guys lose 2 or 3 fights and it's their trainer's fault and they jump ship. I mean, we that now, but we went through a period where you saw a lot of that, right?
Okay.
You're seeing now elite fighters can lose 3 or 4, and I can think of a number of them, and they don't jump ship because they can sort of see that, hey, that can happen, and they're in a good spot, right? But MMA, they're allowed to jump more. You don't see that very much, and to my knowledge, in judo, I certainly know we didn't see that as much in wrestling. We didn't see that in the olden days with Jiu Jitsu, but it's interesting because there is some, for the people that want the instructors that are old fashioned and they're like, hey, they want the loyalty. There is, again, to add more credence to that, just to add more credence to that perspective. Let's say I had a situation here in Vegas where there's a lot, including me. I mean, I train, sometimes I haven't trained in 8-9 months because I'm still healing from, 30 some years of putting my body through the gauntlet. But when I'm training a lot, I train at both Jordan and I. That's how we met. John Freeman's legendary Garage Jiu-Jitsu on Sundays, and there's everybody from there's probably 20 people from 20 different academies there a lot of times. Then there's I've trained with Evan Dunham, who I've known for a number of years, who's a UFC fighter. Of course, I got my black belt from Robert Drysdale. I love Robert. If I was in Summerlin, I'd be training there, predominantly. And then I train with Chris Engel. When I am training, I train there a lot. So, I can just sort of move around. I mean, I've been over to a number of other schools as well. I've trained with Cobra Kai. I've went in there and trained a number of times. I trained with Sonny Nahara, who's a black belt who had his own place. So I have been someone who's participated in that. And of course, I started my jiu-jitsu career with Pedro Sauer in Salt Lake City, Utah, when, Pedro is a legend, phenomenal teacher. And I happened to move. So I would have stayed under Pedro Sauer. I was very happy with my instruction, and I would have stayed under Pedro Sauer to black belt. I mean, I was very happy. He is a great teacher. He knows how to simplify things. And so I loved where I was, and I felt very fortunate to have, that guy was on the mats every day, right? So that's the thing about a lot of schools, is you have a lot of schools where they have the big name, and it's like it's their academy. But that person is now so big, they're never on the mats, right? They're just never there. And I was lucky. Pedro Sauer was there every day. Then I went and trained under Amilcar Cipolli, who was a Higan Machado black belt and who had been under Pedro for years, and had a great experience with Team Mika here in Las Vegas, and got my purple belt and my brown belt with him, and had just a lot of good people. Got to train with Andre Galvo and Quentin Rampage Jackson and tons of others who came through there, Gabby Garcia. So I had a great experience there. And then I wind up with Robert Drysdale, got my black belt from Robert Drysdale, and trained there and competed in some of the biggest tournaments. And so, I am the product, me from white to black, I'm the product of 3 instructors. Part of that was because I did move. I changed states. And then since I've been black for a couple of years, and since I live on the other side of town of Robert Drysdale, I have had the freedom. And because I'm older, I think, too, and I think if I was younger, I would probably, I probably would just drive to Roberts all the time and just do that. I mean, he's got killers on the mat, and it's phenomenal training, and Robert and I have a great relationship. I think I would just make the drive. But at this point in my life, navigating the injuries and not competing much, and my body's been banged up, and business being a priority, I think I just look at it, and I think Robert's okay with it. I look at it like I've earned the right after 33 years in this sport, with wrestling and sparring and jiu-jitsu in the tournaments. I've earned the right. I mean, to sort, I don't have many friendships to go And that's not disloyal to Robert. He knows that. He knows I love him. He knows that I'm grateful that, he taught me a lot. And he not only, this is where a lot of those instructors don't get credit too, though. They get, and Robert was really one of the pioneers in the Vegas market, which was like, I don't care if you train wherever. It might be a little different now, but he was like, I don't care where you're from. You can stay with them and you can come here. He really, really was one of the pioneers of that in Vegas. But where it can get, it can get a little bit different, because let's say that you're training somewhere and you might have a tournament, and the guy, maybe it gets really incestuous, where I remember I was training once at one of the gyms here that wasn't Robert Drysdale, and I was going to do a tournament. Well, there was a guy that was from a different school who was going to do that tournament, and I was working on things specific to beat him in a tournament. And so there were people in the class, since I'm not a product of that academy, there were people in that class, even though this was not the guy I was going to be competing against, this was not his gym, he was not there. But there were people in that class that were much closer to him than to me. They liked him more, they had known him longer, they were friends. And so he could have easily called them, and I think a lot of guys do, and said, hey, you rolled with Frank, he's been over there, how did that go? What's he been doing? Oh, Frank likes foot locks, Frank's been working a lot on the neck. Maybe you're working on something that's not obvious, because in the gym environment, that's one of the things is sometimes you're working on new stuff, you're working on new surprises, and you don't want the whole world to know, even though there's not a lot of secrets in jiu-jitsu. You can go on YouTube, but people may not have known that now Jordan sets up his foot lock or his heel hook a different way. The next time Jordan competes, we may see something that if you watch his old videos, you may not have seen that. You're like, wow. But if you have an insider in the gyms where he's been training, you say, oh, you're going to be competing against Jordan. Oh, he likes this now. He has a great wrist lock. Well, if you don't train with Jordan, you don't know that he has a great you don't know he has a great wrist lock. The only way you could know that is if somebody in the gym training with him is telling you, hey, dude, watch your wrists around this guy, because he's hitting wrist locks left and right now. And so it can take away elements of surprise whenever you go into those other gyms that some people are just like, it doesn't matter. They think they're Marcelo Garcia, like, hey, he can know exactly what I'm going to do. He can't stop it. But there's all kinds of different athletes. There's some athletes that are like, they never want to look the same from one major tournament or one major fight. And I see that even in UFC. There's some fighters that's like, even Usman in the UFC. Every time I see Usman, with the exception of the Kobe Covington fight, he gets better in leaps and bounds. Like, wow, this guy, you don't know what he's going to do next. Even Conor can have some of that, right? With the height, now he's head kick, hurting guys, right? So he's adding new skills. He's become harder to take down. You have a guy like, in my opinion, Rashad Evans, who I deeply respect, but Rashad Evans was pretty much the same fighter over a 10-year period. It was the same fighter. I was like, he was a good fighter. He was a really good fighter, and he stayed the same. And guys just caught up to him. But you have these other, jiu-jitsu players, like, you don't know what they're up to. You don't know what they're working on. And unless you're in their environment. So when you train somewhere that's not your environment, you have the chance that somebody comes in there and they're closer. They're training with you, but they're closer to someone else you're going to be competing against, and they give them sort of an inside thing. Some guys don't worry about that, and some do. But that's a legitimate concern. If you're the kind of person that cares about, hey, we have some surprises. Like, remember Holly Holm. One final thing, guys. So when Holly Holm, this shows kind of the point. So when Holly Holm first came in the UFC, that was like a big deal, right? It was like Holly Holm was like, 35-0, 36-0, phenomenal female boxer, right? She was a champion in boxing. And so everyone's like, Holly Holm has these great hands and whatever, and she had been working on MMA because she lived in New Mexico. And when she came in, there was all this fanfare. Well, guess what? Her first two fights, Holly Holm didn't look that impressive. Go back and look at them. You're like, wow. I mean, her fights were way closer. Everyone was like, wait, we thought this was the woman who's supposed to be able to beat Ronda Rousey. Like, she doesn't look that great. She looks a little timid. She's holding back with her hands. She's not blowing people out of the water like this phenom you were telling us about when she first came in. That was like, if my memory serves me correct, her first two fights. So fast forward now. Ronda Rousey, who's been steamrolling everybody, is in Australia, and Ronda Rousey had another opponent scheduled. I don't remember who that original opponent, but Ronda Rousey had a different opponent. My understanding, my recollection is that that opponent got hurt or fell off the card. So guess who they picked on short notice? Holly Holm. They picked Holly Holm. Now, when I sat down, my friend Clark Anderson and I, we analyzed the fight. We strategically and X's and O's, we loved the matchup for Holly Holm. We were like, Holly Holm's a counter fighter. She's hard to take down. She's a really good athlete. She is tailor-made. She has the style to beat Ronda Rousey. And we probably would have picked Holly Holm to upset Ronda Rousey that night. I believe we would have. We loved her when we broke down the strategy and the X's and O's and her skill set. Why didn't we pick Holly Holm? Because when we looked at her first two fights and how timid she was and how cautious she was and how unimpressive she was, we were like, hey, she's not going to beat Ronda. So she goes out there, fights Ronda Rousey, shocks the world. Wherever you were that night, you know where you were the night you saw her head kick. Now, what did her corner say after the fight? They said, we realized she wasn't as impressive. We held back some things. We have been working on this. We've been thinking about her versus Ronda, not just this fight, but way before that we were thinking of it. And we didn't want to show some things. We were careful in our earlier fight. We didn't want to show the whole deck. And they do that in the NFL too with some trick plays. They'll save them for a really special
Hang on a second.
So anyway, this same thing is not exclusive to a UFC fighter.
True.
The same thing happens even in our sport. Some people think like that. And that is a legitimate concern for those that think like that in jiu-jitsu.
I want to ask a question to Jordan because one of the thoughts that occurred to me is, Jordan, you put out a lot of technique videos through your Facebook presence and through your Instagram page. And which, by the way, guys, I want you to know that very soon we'll have our bios up on the Everyman BJJ.com site with our social media links. But Jordan, this is an interesting question that I have for you because you're an active MMA fighter, amateur fighter with, I think, Tough Enough. In fact, there's a Tough Enough event coming up next week or next weekend or so. What's your approach to what you show and what you don't show through your technique videos on your Instagram page? Do you hold things back so that your Tough Enough competitors don't find out?
I don't really I don't hold things back in that mindset of my Tough Enough competitors finding out. I'm not too worried about my Tough Enough competitors finding out my techniques or what I do in jiu-jitsu. I'm not too worried about that. I do try and not give out all of the goodies to the whole public though, so that I can kind of like the conversation we were having earlier, like a loyalty, kind of like secret technique type of conversation. Like I'll give out like a really good technique, but there'll be like a bunch of details and a bunch of other things that stem off from that technique that I don't show, that I'll show to like the 10th Planet students or somebody paying me for a private. You know what I mean?
Someone paying.
I'll show like the the flashy thing or like the thing that looks cool or the thing that people want to see, and I won't tell them that much about it. And then I'll show it to them, and then there'll be much more going on. And I'll just put it out online, if that makes any type of sense.
Yes, definitely. Frank, your example with Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey was a great story. And, I have to restrain myself from changing the topic because this is really good.
I almost think we should just stay with this topic and then just hit coronavirus. We could even do it Wednesday if you guys just want to hit it because it is timely. But this topic has so many layers, and it is complex. Like we've sort of simplified it now because there's been such a shift in where the customer wants the freedom to train in a bunch of places. But even, you have people I know, I trained with a lot of UFC fighters. They'll train with each other. Sometimes maybe they'll go to Vegas, and two guys who have a pretty good idea, hey, I'm going to fight that guy a year or two from now, they'll still train together. But I know a ton of them who will say, I train with them, but I won't show them this. They'll even be willing to lose or be like, I'm not going to beat you as bad, just not to show everything. I know of a number of instances like that, and I do that. I've done that. I've done that in training where I'm like, okay, I might face this guy and we're training, and I won't show everything, and I'm okay if the round is closer or even if I lose, because it's very important for me not to show everything. I know guys that won't use all their power. You have a whole range of different – everybody has a different viewpoint on that. There's no one way. So it's just fascinating, and depending on the individual, some of them – you got take a guy like Matt Brown. I think Matt Brown, who's made a long career in the UFC and super exciting. And Matt Brown is like, by the way, one of those guys that in the gym, you're like, you would never walk in the gym and be like, this guy is a high-level UFC guy who's going to stay there. I mean, he's not a gym a gym hero, right? He loses round after round, or you would never imagine. And then now I'm not saying that he's hot dogging or sandbagging like what I'm describing. It just so happens that some switch goes off in that guy's brain when he makes the walk in the octagon to where he just becomes another person. He becomes a force. He's not that force. I've seen him in training. He doesn't look like the same force. So what I'm saying is, you can see this happens a lot for whatever reason. I'm not saying that this applies to Matt, but you can be facing a guy. I remember there was one guy here that he had beat me the first time. He's in Vegas. He's a very good black belt, and he fights. And
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he beat me the first time in overtime. Yeah. Okay, he beat me. We trained again a couple times. I dominated the training sessions, right? I dominated them. I had that with another guy who beat me at Pan American. I trained with him, and I dominated him. And he's like, damn, you got way better, right? And then the one guy that I was dominating in training who had beat me the first time, we faced each other again at a major tournament here. And guess what? The match was razor thin. It came down to the final, 5 seconds. And this is a guy that I'm a big game performer. I get better. And I don't get weaker. I'm not like that, I get better in the tournament. But what I'm saying is I had a guy that I was beating in practice handily. And when it came time, I don't know if he was holding back or whatever, that match was razor thin. He rose up. And so there is a lot of how much do you want to show if you know you're going to face that guy? Everybody's different. But there are plenty of people that are like, I don't want to show. Maybe if I know Jordan's going to be one of my top players, there's plenty of people. Some of them will be like, I don't really want to train with him if he's going to be there. And then someone will be like, I'll train with him, but I'm not going to show maybe my A game. Maybe I love close guard. I won't show him what my close guard feels like. Everybody's different.
Jordan, I'm going to redirect again to Jordan because I'm curious. When you find out who you're fighting against next, do you go on their social media and see what they're training? See what they're doing? You do? You're like, hell yeah. Do you ask around? Hey, anyone know this guy? You ever train with him? You ever reach out to 10th Planet out in California?
Nah, not too much.
If he's a non-10th Planet guy?
They're almost always a non-10th Planet guy.
Yeah.
We call that 10-on-10 crime if it's a
10 on 10. There you go. Social norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's usually not 10-on-10 crime. And
but Jordan, are you the kind of fighter, Jordan? There's different kinds of fighters. There's certain fighters that are just like, look, I don't worry. They just take a cursory look, like a glimpse of this is what the guy likes to do. Okay. And then and they're more like Marcelo Garcia, where they're just like, look, I kind of worry about what I do. I just put my game on him, and that's how you seem to be. You're more of like a, Then there's other guys that like to know everything. Like they like to prepare for everything that person's going to do.
No.
And Jordan is more in the category of, I'm unpredictable. I'm dangerous. He's going to have to worry about me. I'm going to put my game on him, impose my style, and that's that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go to his social media just to give me a general idea. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah,
not
is
gonna
he a
go
leg
stalk.
locker?
I'm not gonna go stalk the guy. Figure out what his favorite setup is, what his favorite combo is, what he eats, what his training regimen is. No, I
Wow.
don't care about all that. I don't care if the guy, like, I know some guys, like, I'm not gonna say any names, but one of my really good friends was supposed to have an MMA fight, and he pulled out of his MMA fight because he was actually supposed to fight this guy. He was booked to fight this guy, right? And he was having some issues, some like relationship issues or whatever. And he was feeling all sad one night, and he was supposed to be training in his weight cut, working out, and he was just feeling all sad and just went to In-N-Out in the middle of his weight cut to go get some food at like 1 a.m. or something like that. And he said he went to In-N-Out, got to In-N-Out, was eating it, and then he went on Instagram and checked the guy's Instagram, and the guy was in the gym working out on Twin, working out, and then the guy freaked out and was like, "Oh man, I'm not ready. I'm out here. I'm eating In-N-Out. This guy's in the
Mm.
gym working out at the same time I'm eating my In-N-Out. Like, oh, I can't do this." And so, like, I don't know. I don't really feel like you're really gonna get too much help out of it unless that person is putting out a lot of technique footage and a lot of like competition footage of themselves, and your brain can watch that competition and technique footage and break it down. But those are two big what ifs, because most people don't put up their technique and competition footage in a great amount where you can learn a lot from it. And even if they do put it out and you can learn a lot from it, does that athlete's brain have the ability to watch that footage and be able to break it down and understand what to do and what not to do? Or are they going to watch that footage and see what they're doing good and start to beat down on themselves, debilitating themselves, like, oh my God, this guy's so good. Oh, can I really beat this guy? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? That guy has to post technique footage and competition footage, and you have to be able to watch that footage and be able to decipher it and be able to be able to tell what his weaknesses are and where your strengths are. It's just, I don't know. I don't get
Well,
into all that. I'm just watching. I want to know a general idea about him, and then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. He likes to do this. Okay, cool. I'm gonna beat him up.
one
It's
of the
not a big deal.
things one of the things I'm enjoying about our conversations here is I'm learning from Frank of how he approaches UFC fights and how he characterizes and his perspective of UFC fights and fighters, because I've not really thought about it in that level of detail. So, Frank, I want to thank you.
Let's
I want to thank
really
you
quick.
for bringing your perspective a lot of times to the conversation about how you have analyzed things, because I've not gotten that. I've not really put myself in those shoes and thinking about fights that way. But I started to, like last night when I watched Kasai Pro 7, I'm starting to observe about, to see the fight, wondering, how Nicky Rodriguez approaches his fights. I haven't rolled with him yet, and I don't think I will. Just because of the physicality. But what were you going to say, Frank?
I want to ask you a very important question. Remind me about Brazil, about back in Brazil, because you've been there a number of times. But first, I want to make two observations that piggyback what Jordan just said, because those are great observations. And so, how much I posed this question to Randy Couture years back. I've been interviewing Randy Couture for 15, 16 years, and he had sort of an in between. Of what Jordan was saying. Randy, early in his camp, if he had an opponent, early in his fight camp, he would watch video of his opponent. And he wanted to see, as Jordan said, he wanted to see general tendencies. Okay, this guy likes to set his punches up there. He's a southpaw. He's got these gaps. So him and his coaches would watch that athlete early in their camp. They would develop a strategy on beating him. But Randy said he would not continue to watch that opponent throughout the camp, because he thought, hey, Frank, if you do that too much, it has the effect, as Jordan said, it has the effect of tending to psych you out. If you watch too much of a guy and you watch it for too long, it has the effect of, if the guy's good, you're just like, you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, and it can start to create doubt in you. So his thing was, hey, watch the tape, watch the tendencies, craft a game plan, and then really don't watch a lot of that guy because it can play tricks with your head, especially if the guy's got head kick knockouts or he's got these phenomenal submissions. It can mess with your mind as you get closer. So that was something that Randy Couture told me, where he did study him. They would make a general game plan. Then he would just trust it and say, look, I don't want to see that guy anymore. From that point on, we got a strategy, and I'm worried about what I'm going to do. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to talk about is a guy like Conor McGregor. Talk about the element of surprise. I was saying this to a friend earlier this week. If there was no videotape and YouTube and all these videos, the click of a button, all the, so many, you can, if you have an opponent coming up for Jiu Jitsu or wrestling or MMA, you can usually dig up quite a bit of video on them and study them and look at, okay, oh God, this guy's got a great flying triangle, don't tie it. You think I like Conor McGregor. If there was no video, if there wasn't 10, 12 UFC fights, I'm convinced Conor probably would beat everybody from 170 on down. I honestly believe if they were just fighting in a bubble where there wasn't videotape and you couldn't see how he sets things up, I don't think anybody would see that guy's unpredictability and unorthodoxness coming. I think he probably, I would like him to beat anybody if he just had to go in blind and you couldn't watch video. The reason that certain guys now can beat Conor, and Conor is still a phenomenal fighter when you add it all up. He's a special fighter, and he's really awesome, his ability to go up in weight class and what he's been able to do, even though he's got 4 losses. But if you didn't have videotape to break down and analyze him, and you were getting in there and seeing what he does and how accurate he is, and he's got the kiss of death in that left hand, bro, you wouldn't see that coming. I mean, so video, the advent of, now look at his camps. His camps are very loyal. He doesn't really jump around a lot, right? He's in Ireland. He could easily say, hey, the best training's in America, the best training's in Brazil. He trusts. He's an example of that extreme loyalty with Kavanaugh there, we're up in Ireland. They do very close camps. He doesn't train with a bunch of other world champions per se, but he trusts the loyalty. He trusts the close-knit thing, the special things that they work on, keeping things, there's not a lot of people in there, watching. So from every camp, you don't always know what Conor's working on a lot because it's a very closed, kind of like a boxing. It's almost more like a boxing camp where there's a lot more secrecy and just his team. He relies on them, and he thinks, this has been my rule. I want to shed light here for the Everyman BJJ. I always say, and I told this to Mikey Musumeci years ago. Of course, Mikey is phenomenal, and I said, Mikey, because you always think when you're a world champion, you're always like, I have to train with 10 other world champions all the time, or else I won't be able to win. If I don't have, if I'm not always in a room with killers. And I said, look, Mikey, in boxing and fighting, you look at boxing, the number 1 guy doesn't go train with the number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 guy. He doesn't. I mean, they don't train together. They bring in sparring partners a lot of times that are nowhere near as good as, say, Floyd Mayweather. I mean, the sparring partners a lot of times are nowhere near as good. So it's not, in boxing, you can't train with the number 2 or 3 guy. You're going to be fighting him soon. They don't train together. Hey, let's train with the number 2. Deontay Wilder's not going to say to, Anthony Joshua, hey, why don't we train now and we'll fight next year? That's never going to happen, right? Tyson Fury's not going to say that to Ruiz, whatever, the kid Ruiz, and say, let's train together and fight in 6 months. That's not going to happen, okay? Actually, wait. There was an offer. I rescind what I just said. Anthony Joshua, I think, did offer to train with Tyson Fury. That's phenomenal. That's how rare it is. I think he actually did offer to train. That's phenomenal. Very rare. But this is what I said to Mikey, and I still stand by this. The most important thing, in my opinion, and I differ a lot, most elite fighters will disagree with me, but I stand by this based on my 30-some years, almost 40 years now, watching fighting and boxing and being ringside for boxing, cage side for UFC fights, behind the scenes UFC, training with all these fighters. My opinion is this. You training in a room full of killers is overrated. Conor's proving it. Pro boxers have proven it. Other people will prove it. I think it's overrated. Iron sharpens iron. It's overrated. That's my opinion. However, this is the big asterisk. You need at least, in order for you to be a world champion and to be awesome, you need at least 1 Jedi in the room. There needs to be at least one Jedi in the room, hopefully 2. The more if you have somebody that has a superbly high IQ like Kavanaugh has, in the case of Conor and Kavanaugh, they have at least 2 Jedis, 2 geniuses, 2 super high through the roof fight IQ guys in the room. When Floyd Mayweather trains with Roger Mayweather, with Floyd Sr., they have at least 3 geniuses in the room at all times. The geniuses know how to make do with the resources they have. You can give the geniuses limited resources. They know what you need. They know what it looks like. They can find the pieces. They don't need to go in the room down in, New Mexico with 50 other guys and get you hurt and get you whatever, and everybody knows what you're going to do. No. The geniuses say, in fact, sometimes it's better to just have a smaller camp with the geniuses sometimes, because you get the one-on-one. You don't get your Greg Jackson's. Yeah, he's a genius, but he's got 50 other guys he's got to be a genius for, and his time gets spread thin. When you're Conor McGregor, guess where all of Kavanaugh's attention goes when you're having a fight come up? Guess where 90% of that attention goes? To Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
So that is more important. What is more important is to have that one genius or 2 geniuses in the room who put a ton of attention on you and who know the resources to build around you and can fill in those gaps and say, listen, with our 10 guys, we can create the environment tailor-made for you to win this fight or to win this tournament. That is the most important thing in mind. Now, if you have no genius in the room, if you don't trust your instructor's level of genius, then you need to go to an environment where you have a genius who believes in you and who can pass that on.
Whoa.
If you have 2 geniuses in the room.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a very inflammatory thing for some people to handle. As far as that, you need to go somewhere else, and the decision of when you need to. And I know as we come down the home stretch here,
if you want to be a world champion, I'm saying, if you want that, I would say surround yourself with genius. If you wanted to be a world champion, you were going to have to surround yourself with at least one genius. That's all I'm saying.
Those are thought I need to put out here before we, as I said, as we come down the home stretch here, before we say some other things. I was thinking about what Gordon Ryan had said before he retired, of how they were, him and the inner circle there, because I'm not a part of that circle. As they were talking about, he said that, we're so far down the line with what we're working on that it would be years for people to catch up to us in the leg lock business. And then he goes and retires, and then unretires, which, okay. I'm confused myself. But I was thinking of how do we get there? The everyday. I like to say the Jiu Jitsu, or the guy like where I'm at now, and I'm contemplating. I would love to start competing this year. And I really want to enter, the seasonality of, I think that IBJJF does points tally. I was looking on their website the other night of how they tally points. And I'm a Master 4 category, I think, if they do it every 5 years, since I'm Master 4. You're right. You have to go to where you have 1 Jedi or 2 Jedi, but you have to surround yourself with that kind of training environment.
A Jedi who's going to invest in you and believe in you, who has time, because again, you can have Jedis in the room, but they're not putting their attention on you.
Well, you have to have money to bring that.
Look,
where do I stand right now?
Listen. John Donaher is a super smart guy, but how many guys can he build? How many guys can he one-on-one in a week put the attention on to be a champion? I know you can put 100 guys on the mat, but how many guys can you invest in yourself and sit there one-on-one? There's a limit. I don't know what that number is, but there's a limit. It's not dozens and dozens.
But then you go into your secondary and your tertiary levels of who you train with to get that. Like for me, here in New York, one of my resources that I'm going to start training with now, not for strength and conditioning, is Timothy Barrett. You may not know that name. but I'll bring him up later, and I'll talk more about him. But I'm going to be using him and paying dearly for it um, to train with him as a strength and conditioning coach for me to get ready and to build myself up.
No, what these geniuses try to do, Noah, is they try to take. So Henzo tries to, produces a Donaher. Donaher produces a blank, and then on down the line, that's what they're trying to do.
Spawning.
Yeah, they're trying to multiply. They're trying to multiply genius.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like there's 20 geniuses in the room. I'm sorry, there might be some high level, tons of high level guys, but there's not 10 Donahairs as awesome as Henzo's is. There's not 10 Donahairs running around. There's still a limit as to how much in one person, how much attention. Just like teachers, look, there's a reason that in America, if you walk around classroom, you have a 30-to-1 ratio. No parent wants to hear that. No parent wants to hear in America, hey, yeah, we have one teacher per 35 students. Nobody wants to hear that. That would scare you have a daughter, Noah. What would that do to you?
I don't like that idea at all. Yeah. So read the what's the risk of the Creonte? We come back full circle to this. Is it cheating? Are you cheating on your instructor by being, a Creonte? Because you feel like you don't get that attention. And so that's kind of a power move by a student going out there into the wild and seeking another instructor. So we didn't get to.
It's like putting a ring on it. It's like putting a ring on it. You're almost putting a ring on. You're marrying the academy.
Yes, and your identity is so wrapped up into it that no, I'm a Henzo. Yeah, and I will tell you. Here's how I gotta say about Henzo's, and I enjoy training with you and Jordan, and I enjoy our private lessons. That we get to roll and we get to share things. But I hate to break your heart, but there's something about me wanting to say one day I'm a Henzo Gracie black belt, but that doesn't take anything away from what you and Jordan share with me, or with what Darren McCall shared with me, or what Roberto Lima shared with me, or down in Gordo's where we have Pedro. Oh no, what's his name? I may not be saying his name. I can't remember his name exact. Or Weber at Gordo's, or what Robert Drysdale shares with us when I go visit him, or any of the other places that I've trained at, or you trained at. It doesn't take anything away. It's just at some point you need to choose. You need to plant. I believe you need to say, I am going to be this, unless life circumstances change. You say, I will be this. This is the flag I carry. I think that's healthy for you to say that, and to commit to that instructor for the long term, whether or not for good and for bad. It is a marriage that you stay true to. That's my opinion. It helps.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a right or wrong. I think that it's just in what you, the student, the paying customer, what do you feel comfortable with? Some people love the idea of, again, and it's not right to impose anything. It's not right to come from a place of dogma. It's what you feel comfortable with and what they feel. As long as, an agreement is what two people agree to. As long as my instructor, like Robert, knows that I love him and I'm proud I got my black belt from him. I give him credit a lot. And so it's really just, going and finding the relationship with that instructor where whatever it is, if you agree that this is your one instructor for the rest of your life and you both love that, great. And it works wonderfully for you, great. And if you're the kind of person that's a competitor and you want to, you jump around and you love the smorgasbord of life and your instructor is okay with that, great. And if you're somewhere in the middle and you can work that out and find an instructor who's okay with that, but they're going to be the one that belts you and it's fine, great. Just find the place, find the home that gives you that, place on the dial that fits. There's no right or wrong there. It's just what degree of loyalty. Everybody has a different definition of loyalty, and what does that loyalty look like, and are you both okay with that? And if you're okay with that, outstanding. Stay there. Stay there. You're lucky.
I think it's also a part of the experience too, to find your home. In Harry Potter, they have where they get your sorting, where you're sorted. They put the little hat on in the hall. I don't know if you've seen Harry Potter, but they do this thing where they figure out, where are you, School of Hogwarts? Are you this, that? You do need, you might start somewhere, and what's it to say, if you're not satisfied with your experience, and you do go and you have a little bit of a wanderlust at some point, to say, well, I just don't know enough, and I want to try out to find where I belong. And
the final thing is, you have a lot of people out there, Noah and Jordan. You have a lot of people out there that maybe they're at an academy, but maybe they don't feel like their instructor cares about it. Maybe it's not a loyalty thing. Maybe they just feel like their instructor doesn't care. In some cases, doesn't care about them at all. Right? It's just like a money thing or whatever. And so people might not feel comfortable with that. They might be like, wow, the instructor doesn't even know my name, or he doesn't really even care about me, or he coaches a lot of the other students, but he never, or she never coaches me, right? So there's different things out there. Like, yeah, you might be a loyal person, but if you feel like you're not valued, you're not invested in, the instructor doesn't even know your name, you could be this most loyal person on the planet, or maybe the instructor doesn't represent the values you do. Maybe you have a certain value, and then you're like, hey, I'm a loyal person, but I don't like our values are so different. Or you're a loyal person, but the academy's kind of reckless, and there's a lot of injuries, and they don't, there's more of the wild, wild west. So it doesn't mean just because somebody changes academies, that should not be a referendum on, is that person loyal? That there are so many other factors. You could be an extremely loyal person and change academies for many reasons that have nothing to do. You could be a super honest person, super loyal, but it's just you don't think the environment's safe enough. You don't think, maybe you don't agree with the values. Maybe you think it's overpriced, or maybe your money is tight in some cases, right? That it's too expensive for them, or maybe the drive is too far. You're busy with life. You've got kids. The drive is too far. There are so many other moving pieces than to rush and say that student's a Creonte. He or she is disloyal.
From that perspective, true. I totally agree. I could never see Jordan changing flags and go to like a Gracie Baja full time, and where they only wear white gis, because that doesn't fit him. That doesn't fit how he is. That culture. There's a culture. There's something to be said for diversity and for inclusivity. When I train at Henzo's, it is like a small city, and that works for me. I like to have a lot of different personalities. For me, I don't want to be in this like provincial where I know that I can only, when I go and I'll be like the only blue belt there, and the rest will be white belts. That would kill me. Somewhere in, I know former high school classmates of mine who are purple belts, and they have their own Jiu Jitsu academy, and they're out in Tennessee. I couldn't do that. I could never do that. It's just too small.
If Jordan ever left 10th Planet, my jaw might literally fall off.
I would say I'd need to have all my teeth removed, because that's how far I would go. Wow. I would have a perma shock expression.
No, 10th Planet's my home.
In fact, I could see Jordan coming and saying, I want to open my own 10th Planet.
I
definitely open my own 10th Planet.
I see that happening.
That's a bold prediction, Noah.
I see it. I truly see it. Oh, what? What do you mean? I see that happening in under 6 years, in 5 years. I see that. I see that. I see
I sure hope
Jordan.
so.
Huh?
I said I sure hope so.
With with Coach Casey's blessing as well. You know, from what I know, from what the wonderful things that you've said about Casey, I see him fully blessing that, and with Eddie Bravo, Edgy Bravo saying that
I
too.
gotta come over there one day. I have never trained with Jordan in the 10th Planet environment. One of these days, I really respect that Eddie did it his way, and that it's a no-gi thing, right, for the wrestlers like me who go there. And so one of these days, we get healthy, go over there with Jordan. That would be a great experience. That'd be a new experience. I've never done that. Like go over there and really,
Yeah,
really more
man.
deeply. Now, what's interesting, I was moving stuff into storage the other day, and I have Eddie Bravo's Mastering the Guard, whatever. I have the book, and Eddie gave it to me himself, and I have it
Really?
in storage. I read that book years ago. I went through it, but I haven't immersed myself. I know that there's many other, incarnations of that system. So it would be great to like sit in there for a week or 2 weeks and just see how that system evolved. And I like how he handles the warm ups and everything. And so that's something that's on my on my bucket list. Like go with Jordan and spend a week or two and they just did some funky stuff, man.
Why don't we say this? I would love to see a movement in Jiu Jitsu academies where it's open house, and where there's an invitation to say, hey, like Marcelo Garcia's, to extend a cupcake hour, extend an invite to Henzo, so just to come and say, come and just one training session a year, we invite our friends over, from Henzo's, or a 10th Planet to invite, pick a rival to come over
It
and
would
say.
have to be a charity event of some sort. Probably.
That's a great idea.
Event.
That is a great idea. That is a great idea. A charity event for bully awareness, or some other appropriate, or a fundraiser for someone's medical, like a medical situation. That's a great idea.
Now, really quick though, I hate to spoil the fun, but there's a certain event tonight called the Super Bowl that is actually getting ready to start, and I know Noah is not a football guy.
I don't care for it.
I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. I'm a Baltimore native. It breaks my heart we're not in the Super Bowl, but I do love football, and the Super Bowl beckons, my friend.
Oh,
and we got to pay homage.
I could care less. I could care less. I'm going to the gym.
Las Vegas is unveiling a new slogan. Our new slogan, they're unveiling a 60-second ad, which is, it used to be what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Now it's what happens in Vegas only happens in Vegas. I'm not crazy about that slogan, but they're doing a 60-second commercial. I want to see it so I can get a little more information. But this has been a blast, guys. You guys.
Jordan's got something for us.
Jordan, what do you got for us really quick? You want to sound off? Or you're just
Man,
admiring?
I just lost like the last 30 seconds of that conversation. Somebody called me. I just got back into here, but it sounds like we're ending the conversation right now.
We are. So listen, so I just want to tell the viewer there really quick.
I think that for 2020 in Jiu-Jitsu, people should be able to train where they want to train at, as long as they're staying loyal to their own coach. And I think that's kind of a new age approach to Jiu-Jitsu, but that's kind of my standpoint on it. I think that's kind of how people should look at Jiu-Jitsu. As long as you're loyal to your coach and you stay at the gym, like, they're still loyal to you. You can still be loyal and train somewhere else. That's my personal viewpoint.
Guys, when I go to Robert Drysdale's academy, I wear my Henzo Gracie gi, and I wear it proudly. And
I'll wear my 10th Planet rash guard if I go somewhere else.
Yes, and I think that I think that's awesome. I think that's it's like, look, what's weird to me is to wear someone else's gi, because I'm not comfortable. That was like
I will not train at a school that forces me to wear their patch. If I can't, like,
So,
if
there
I
you go.
have to wear their stuff, I'm not training there. I'm good.
Yeah, I feel that way because I'm like that's me saying these are the banner that I carry.
Yeah.
I'm a Hinzo Gracie student, Jiu-Jitsu. That's my flag, and you know, if I were to wear someone else's patch or gi, it's out of acknowledgement of them. But I mean, it's you know, it's a
Not doing
visitor.
it, buddy.
It's a visitor as a visitor. You know, as a visitor. Like I could
Well,
never
listen, gentlemen,
wear a pro Army or a Navy shirt. I could never do that. I'm a Marine.
there is an event called the Super Bowl.
I don't care about that.
event.
No, Frank. We're gonna stay on here for now. The podcast goes on.
I've got to eat a
Nobody
lentil
cares about the Super Bowl.
Super
I've
bogus.
got
Super
a lower glycemic thing going on. I got lentil soup, some sea salt, some avocado,
I haven't eaten
And-
since last night. I'm still fine.
and I got to write up our show notes here. But I want to thank everybody. Please like and share this on social media. Everyman BJJ, our email. We welcome your questions, your comments. I don't care. Noah's a little more sensitive than I am. I don't care if you're criticizing harshly, whatever. It's all good. I know some people just like to troll, no matter how.
Well, the trolls are just dumb.
Whatever. We're gonna get better.
Places
We're gonna get better. We're gonna get more experience. And our email for comments, for questions, everymanbjj@gmail.com. We welcome it. If you don't like us, stick with us. We're going to get a lot better, and we got a lot more good stuff coming. So, sounding off today, I'm Frank Forza. This is Jordan Worth, Noah Green. We'll see you next Sunday, every Sunday, 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. And we're usually shooting for around 90 minutes. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye,
Awesome.
guys.
Have a good day, guys. See you later.
Bye.